such a tragic case this is. And right now we have with us Corbett O'Meara. This is Jamar Pinckney Sr.'s defense attorney, and he's with us right now. Corbett, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me here.
Now, Corbett, let me just start with the idea of the sexual abuse that is alleged to have happened involving the victim and the victim's half-sister. How does this affect your case? Because we've got a witness on the stand talking about the victim violating her daughter. How does that affect your client?
Well, it affected him obviously in a very profound way, and in a way that I don't think anybody who's never been faced with something like that could ever fully appreciate. I was watching the previous segment where the viewers and the psychologist and the author were condemning Jamar Pinckney Sr., and to do so, don't judge a man until you walk a mile in his shoes. Nobody, I hope, is ever going to be faced with what Jamar Pinckney Sr. was faced with that day. Strategically, as an attorney, from the very moment that I came onto the case and Mr. Draper came onto the case, we sought to make the theme of the case the fact that there can be no rational reaction to the rape of a child. From the very first moments we were making statements, we made that statement and we carried it through the entire trial. We sought to have the jury make a rational decision, a decision based upon extraordinary facts that was based on reason. That's what society would hope Jamar Pinckney Sr. would have done. It is not what he did. He had a very extreme and very tragic reaction to circumstances that no one knows how they would deal with.
But does that mean that anytime someone hears something like this, as tragic and as shocking as it may be, that this kind of reaction is justified?
It doesn't justify anything. In my opening statement, we didn't ask the jury to excuse Jamar Pinckney Sr.'s conduct. We didn't say it wasn't criminal conduct. Jamar Pinckney Sr. never looked for exoneration, looked for anything other than a just reaction to what is a absolutely negative and unjustifiable reaction. But the law takes into account mental states, and it ought to, because there is a difference between somebody who commits a cold-blooded murder. There is a difference between somebody who, for their own selfish purposes, decides to take another person's life, or who behaves in a way where they don't care if they take another person's life, and a person who's faced with a situation, a triggering event, a adequate provocation which causes them to lose control of themselves. And of course, we would all hope, and most people do, respond much better to the tragic situations in their lives. That's what society expects of people. That's what I would hope for myself. But we just don't know how we would react in a situation like that. Jamar Pinckney Sr. was a good man, a man who had lived his entire life trying, even up until the moment this act occurred, trying to make the best decisions, trying to deal with this in the most rational way. And when there was that final confession, the confession that it was actually a premeditated and complete rape of his young child, he snapped.
All right, Corbett, before I let you go on, I want to go through some of the testimony and ask you about it. Yesterday, Lizette Monique Cherry described in great detail what she saw of that fight between Pinckney Sr. and his son. Take a listen to this.
Then he gonna see how I feel. He gonna see how I feel. Carl said, my son, get up running. Daddy, no, I'm sorry. No, that. You plotted on my daughter. You plotted on my daughter, Carl said. He went outside my son. I said, Jamar, calm down. Stop, please. Think about what you're doing. He went back. No, my said, go that way. He went back that way. You plotted on my daughter. You plotted on my daughter. On my daughter. He took his head and shot him right there. I said, like, no, Daddy, no. And he shot him. My son collapsed.
Now, Corbett, I want to ask you, as the defense attorney here, how do you handle, you mentioned that snapping moment. There's been some dispute as to what Jamar Jr. said to Jamar Sr., but let's assume that he did say exactly what you just said. I think, how do you as a defense attorney handle the idea that he then has him stripped down, marches him outside, and then shoots him in a way that some people would say is execution style? It just seems a little bit less than someone who just says, boom, just pops off, and instead it seems so much more deliberate.
Well, obviously we had our work cut out for us. These were horrible facts, and one of the things you don't see on Perry Mason shows and Law and Order is that facts matter, and you have to deal with the facts as they're presented. There were 3 very credible witnesses that had ties both to Jamar Pinckney Sr. and Jamar Pinckney Jr. through blood and through family relationships. We have to deal with the facts as they're given. Obviously, this was a horrible situation. This was not a situation where where identity was an issue or where that there was an issue as to how it happened. It was an incredibly difficult job. There were incredibly difficult facts to be presented with, but what we have to do as lawyers, what I had to do as a lawyer, was present the real, rational facts in a way that a jury could make a rational decision and try to diffuse as much as possible the passion that the jury is going to have and ask them to do what we would hope Jamar Pinckney Sr. would have done,